Now to the rest of the day's news, and never before seen images have been released in the US offering a rare look at the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein's notorious Caribbean island home. The pictures and videos released by Democrats in the US Congress provide what those politicians call a disturbing look into the disgraced financier's world. One image shows a no trespassing sign on the beach of the US Virgin Islands property. Videos show the lavish grounds with an outdoor swimming pool, palm trees and statues. They also show the inside of Epstein's house, where multiple bedrooms and living quarters can be seen. One room is largely filled with a dentist's chair and has face masks hanging from the walls. Well, let's go straight to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who can bring us up to date on these latest images that we're seeing. I mean, Mark, as we were saying, I mean, these have been described as disturbing, and frankly, especially that dentist chair and the statues that we're seeing do look incredibly disturbing. Do they necessarily provide more information or move the needle on anything at this point?
No, in a word, you're right. That last image raises a huge number of questions. I mean, the necessity for a dentist chair on a private island resort, we just don't know. The other images taken on their own do not move anything on. They are simply images of, as you can see here, a swimming pool, photographs of pretty luxurious bedrooms, bathrooms as well. But with the context that we now have about what is alleged to have gone on that island, then yes, you could understand why the Democrats on this committee have described them as deeply disturbing. The context is all important. Why are we seeing these images now? Well, because they have been released by the Democrats within the Oversight Committee on Capitol Hill, who are trying to pressure Donald Trump to do what he has promised to do, which is release all the Epstein files. Remember, it was mid-November when Donald Trump succumbed to pressure and said, fine, we will release all the Epstein files, and ordered his Department of Justice to do just that by the 19th of December. So the clock is ticking. The Democrats want everything to be released now. They have got hold of some documents and files, of which these that we're playing here are a proportion. And so they're releasing bits and pieces that they feel they're able to release, and effectively publicly saying, look what's out there, there's plenty more. Now it's time, President Trump, for you to press the button in your Justice Department and release all of them. But taken alone, these are not particularly dramatic images. I mean, there have been images taken of Epstein's properties, both on the US Virgin Islands, but elsewhere as well. Before, when Ghislaine Maxwell was facing trial a few years ago, a lot of images emerged of his house in West Palm Beach in Florida. So these images have been coming out over time. I think the headline today is that this is another sign of the Democrats within the system here in the United States putting more pressure on the Trump administration. And to that end, a number of the lawmakers on Capitol Hill have written to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, today, asking her for an update by Friday of when she, as Attorney General, will adhere to what Donald Trump has now signed off, which is the release of all the files.
Mark, thank you as always. Now we've got some breaking news that's come in the last few minutes. Israeli officials say they've launched an airstrike in southern Gaza in retaliation for an attack by militants earlier in the day that they say wounded 5 Israeli soldiers. Now, of course, this comes off the back of an already fragile ceasefire that has mostly held up since October of this year, despite claims of violations by both Israel and Hamas. But we are getting reports just in the last few minutes that Israel has said it has launched an airstrike in southern Gaza late this evening in retaliation for an attack by militants earlier in the day that they say wounded 5 Israeli soldiers. I'd like to now focus on a stark warning about the growing threat of disinformation and how quickly it can inflame regional tensions. Deepfake videos are being widely circulated across social media, making entirely false claims about rising tensions between Pakistan and India. The clips, which have been shared by politicians in Pakistan, take an interview with Imran Khan's sister on this programme last night, which I did, twisting her words to make her say things she frankly didn't say. Here's an excerpt from one of those videos where she's made to accuse the chief of Pakistan's army, Asim Munir, of wanting war with India. Have a listen.
Well, Yalda, this Asim Munir, is a very radicalized Islamist, Islamic conservative, and this is the reason why he yearns for a war with India, because his Islamic radicalization and conservatism is forcing him to fight against those who don't believe in Islam.
That was the interview I did there with Alima Khan, the sister of Imran Khan. And it was absolutely clear that's not something that Alima Khanum had said. She was speaking about the imprisonment of her brother, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan. While she did refer to Field Marshal Munir, it was only in the context of blaming him for her brother's detention. She made no reference whatsoever to a conflict with India. But in a sign of just how dangerous fake news on social media can be, the clip has been picked up by press on the subcontinent as a legitimate story with headlines such as these, what you're looking at on your screen. It shows the importance of trusted media outlets such as ours here at Sky News. This disinformation comes at a time where there are fierce Pakistanis moving towards authoritarian rule, with the constitution being amended to give the army chief unprecedented powers. Now, joining us now is Rakib Hamid Naik, the Executive Director of the Centre for the Study of Organised Hate, a research and policy organisation based in Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I'm not sure if you actually saw that deep fake of my interview with Alima Khan, the sister of Imran Khan, but it was quite clear that it was fake when you just looked at the way that our mouths moved. But frankly, it did go viral and it is circulating on social media, but also being picked up by mainstream media in the subcontinent.
Well, yeah, when you first see this video, it's genuinely very hard to tell whether it's real or not. But it looks and sounds very convincing. But if you watch it a couple of times, you begin to notice that something is off. These small glitches in the facial expressions and the audio. And now in South Asia, you have extremely high internet penetration, but very low media and digital literacy. And that combination makes the region incredibly vulnerable to these manipulated videos. A clip that seems very authentic at first glance can travel through millions of phones before anyone can even consider that possibility.
That is what appears to have happened here, where it looks like it was generated quite soon after that interview I did with her, and then it got picked up very quickly and then wasn't verified. And then suddenly we saw media in Pakistan and India quoting her and quoting the deep fake.
Right. I mean, in fact, we tracked the spread of this clip on X, and it was shared and reposted thousands of times, both in India and Pakistan, and not even a single post had the community note fact-checking the claims. And as you mentioned, which is also very concerning, how quickly a deep fake like this can shape mainstream narratives, where you have several mainstream media outlets, both in India and Pakistan, reporting on it without any verification, which shows how polarized and fragile the media ecosystem in the subcontinent has become, and how easily disinformation can slip straight into the news cycles.
And frankly, how dangerous, given we saw India and Pakistan go head-to-head in May. We're talking about two nuclear powers. When this kind of disinformation, fake news, deep fakes spread by the mainstream media in the country, in these two countries, it can have, dangerous and detrimental impact on not just society but policy.
You're very right. I mean, it feeds directly into these fault lines that have existed in the subcontinent since partition, and India and Pakistan are nuclear-armed neighbors with decades of mistrust, recurring military standoffs, and extremely polarized public opinion. So when a deepfake like this that attributes remarks to an important political figure, it is instantly picked up across the border and interpreted through a nationalistic lens, and then amplified by both partisan media and these online networks. And that creates this feedback loop where false or fabricated content contributes to this broader outrage and deepening of polarization and division, as well as pressures both the governments to respond to something that never actually happened.
And you just talk there about the combination of these deep fakes emerging and then the lack of literacy that people have when it comes to these things. They're not able to identify. I mean, I was able to look at it immediately and know that it was a deep fake. But in general, people who don't necessarily know how to spot it will share it and it will circulate. How difficult is it then to reverse that and help people understand that actually this news wasn't real?
Well, I think in this particular case, which is clearly a textbook example of how deepfakes are being used to manipulate public opinions, when these videos that are intended to influence or peddle certain narratives, it's extremely hard to reverse that narrative. And in this particular case, no matter how many clarifications Alima Khan will give, it will certainly not strike with the people because it's already almost on every account out there right now. So, but I think here we need to talk about the accountability on two levels. That is, first with the AI developers themselves, and then the social media platforms. Because they have to take accountability when it comes to building adequate safeguards to prevent political or such malicious use of their technology and platforms to spread.
In the this particular region, especially when I guess conspiracy theories are rife everywhere, but certainly it is something that because of the level of mistrust between these two states, it does build up. Just talk to us about the dangers then of not just deep fakes, but this level of disinformation and the role that the digital space and AI, social media has and the impact it then has.
Well, I think a single manipulated video in this particular context can escalate this perception of hostility between these two countries that already operate on a very razor-thin margins of trust. And AI isn't inventing entirely new forms of harms. It is massively amplifying existing propaganda strategies. And as I mentioned, a region with low digital literacy, that amplification becomes dangerous because what once required coordinated effort can now be generated and circulated at scale in minutes. So, and in this particular context, we have, India and Pakistan relations that are very volatile. It can definitely have real-world consequences that extend far beyond the digital sphere.
Rakib Hamid Naik, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
We've got some developing news now. Donald Trump has been speaking about the US talks with Russia's President Putin aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. Just have a listen.
He would like to end the war. That was their impression. Now, whether or not, that was their impression. Their impression was that he would like to see the war ended. I think he'd like to get back to dealing a more normal life. I think he'd like to be trading with the United States of America, frankly, instead of, losing thousands of soldiers a week. But their impression was very strongly that he'd like to make a deal. We'll see what happens.
That was President Trump speaking about the ongoing peace talks that his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, have been holding with Vladimir Putin in Moscow in the last day. Although there is speculation that Vladimir Putin has rejected those talks. Donald Trump talking there and saying that Vladimir Putin very much wants peace, and these talks are ongoing. He said Putin wants to end the war. Now, NATO foreign ministers have been meeting in Brussels with the latest developments on Ukraine at the top of the diplomatic agenda. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte spoke out of support of President Trump's strategy to end the war.
There is only one person in the whole world who was able to break the deadlock when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and that is the American President Donald J. Trump, and he did. He started in February to get engaged, and he is engaged up to and including today, and his team is engaged, including Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, and all the key players on the American side. And that's crucial, because in the end, US is by far the biggest ally in NATO and the strongest nation on earth. And it's really up to them first to break that deadlock and then make sure that others follow.
That was Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, speaking in Brussels. Well, earlier I spoke to Latvia's Foreign Minister, Beba Braže, who's in Brussels. Have a listen.
The US knows that we all support their objective to reach peace that stops killing, as the president said, that is acceptable to both Ukraine, also to Russia, because that is needed for sustainability of the peace, but also that very clearly prevents a new aggression by the butchering Kremlin.
But do you actually believe that the Russians, Vladimir Putin, is serious about reaching some kind of peace deal? I mean, even in the last few hours, his attitude has been described as wasting the time of the world.
It seems he's mocking the US efforts, but let's give him some benefit of the doubt in terms that US is serious about its efforts. So US knows what it wants. US has a backing of us, and Ukraine is very constructive.
Well, in the conversations I've had with President Zelensky, he's talked about willing to do anything to come to some kind of resolution to end the war. But do you think that ultimately there will be some uncomfortable compromises that Ukraine will have to make?
We all understand who is the aggressor and who is the victim here. So if we let Russia get away with something that doesn't ensure that Ukraine is sovereign, that Ukraine is democratic, that Ukraine stands strong after the ceasefire or whatever deal is reached, that we will all be under further threats.
What we are seeing, though, is an increasingly aggressive Russia and, frankly, an increasingly unreliable United States as a partner for Europe. If the United States decides that it wants to step away completely in terms of support for Ukraine, will Europe step up and step in?
It's very clear that there is no closer alliance, no closer allyship and friendships between Europe and the US. So that was reconfirmed today at the NATO foreign ministers meeting. We should not let Russia get through the peace talks that it cannot get on the battlefield, making sure that support for Ukraine is there, that NATO's own investment in defense is there. So that requires investment in ourselves, our own strength.
You've spoken about the talking points, the importance of NATO, the importance of your alliance, Europe's alliance with the United States. But the reality and what has been said, certainly over the course of the last year, has been something completely different. And there are concerns about the world order, the relationship between Europe and the United States commitment to not just Europe, but to Ukraine as well. Is Europe preparing itself for that reality?
European allies obviously have invested significantly since the first administration of President Trump's. The investment in defense has doubled. Today, there were new announcements on the Support for Ukraine initiative, which buys Ukraine the American weapons. That's reaching 3 billion plus additional assistance to Ukraine, which is around 60 billion. So there's significant commitment by European allies, but also we hear the same thing from allies in the Pacific. But then there are other big decisions that have to be made. The future of funding for Ukraine. European Commission today has proposed a way ahead on the frozen Russian assets. Then there is the issue on sanctions, the strengthening of the sanctions against Russia, because we have to deny Russia money, we have to deny technology, we have to deny partnerships, enablements, and that is having a result. We are seeing Russian economy struggling. We are seeing that Russia is fully cannibalizing its civilian economy, that both the price increases, inflation, the interest rates, literally everything is crumbling in Russia.
You spoke there about this not just being a battle that Ukraine is fighting Russia, that this is a problem for all of Europe, and we have continued to hear that. Vladimir Putin has said that his war is not with Europe and the European continent. This is a war simply with and a conflict with Ukraine. But if Europe wants to go to war, that Russia and he is ready. How do you respond to that?
I think, first of all, it's important not to listen to Russian disinformation and propaganda, because I remember that the butchering Kremlin said before February of 22 that Russia has no intention to attack Ukraine. So now we are in the almost the fourth anniversary of the war. Second part, Europe, European countries, NATO allies are not party to the war. We are supporting a victim of aggression. Ukraine is fighting, it's doing its self-defense under the United Nations Charter, Article 51, which provides the right for self-defense in case of armed aggression. So Ukraine is right, and countries that provide assistance to Ukraine are covered under this article. It's Ukraine's self-defense. So we are not party to the war. So again, Russia's disinformation and propaganda, we always have to check it.
That was Latvia's foreign minister speaking to me a little earlier. Let's go back to the United States now, where a report from the Pentagon has found the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, put American troops at risk by sharing sensitive information on a messaging app. Sources familiar with the findings have shared details with our US partners NBC before the official release tomorrow. Well, let's go straight to our David Blevins, who joins me from Washington. And I mean, David, can we just go back and put all of this into context for our viewers? We often refer to this as Signalgate. Just give us a quick summary of exactly what happened and why the conclusion of this report is that US troops were put in danger by the Secretary of War.
Well, back in March of this year, Yalda, operational details related to US airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen were shared in real time on the Signal messaging app between very senior figures in the Trump administration. And let me just give you an example of the sort of information they were sharing. 1500 hours, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop. Godspeed to our warriors. And then there was another message that said, we are currently clean on OPSEC. Of course, that is operational security, and that suggests they were aware of the operational sensitivity of the material that they were sharing in this forum rather than on a clear line. And this report really is damning, according to our colleagues at NBC. The Pentagon watchdog finding that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth risked imperiling American lives, that he violated military protocols by using his own personal phone rather than an official phone, and they reached no conclusion on whether the information had been declassified in advance because Pete Hegseth declined to be interviewed by investigators, giving a written submission instead. He is a former Fox News anchor, as we know, a very controversial choice by Trump to be the Secretary of Defense, and there's been no shortage of scandal. He was only in the job a few weeks when Signalgate happened. Since then, the whole Pentagon press corps has walked out over draconian restrictions he has imposed upon them. And this week, again, he's been front and centre in terms of headlines over a second strike carried out on a boat in the Caribbean, with some of his critics describing that as a war crime. Right now, he appears to still have the backing of the US president, but certainly this report is going to put more pressure on him. It's going to bring fresh questions about his ability to not just lead the most powerful army in the world, but to protect American troops.
David, thank you so much. Well, earlier we heard about the dangers of fake news online in Pakistan, and the spread of harmful content is one reason why the Australian government is banning under-16s from using social media, with the new law taking effect a week from today. It will block minors from using platforms such as Instagram, TikTok and Snapchat. The government says it will protect children, but two 15-year-olds, Noah Jones and Macy Nayland, are taking them to court in an attempt to overturn the ban. I spoke to Noah about the campaign.
I've decided to be the plaintiff for young Australians having their right to free speech taken away from them, because I feel quite strongly about it, and I also feel that we deserve to have a voice and we deserve to hear others, and I feel without social media we'll be like taken away from that and isolated from our country and the rest of the world.
But can you understand why the government has decided to take this step? I mean, they say that it impacts children psychologically. They've based it on a number of studies. There's a particular study here done by the World Health Organization in 2024 that talks about the negative consequences of social media on children.
There's definitely negatives to social media. There is dangerous things on there. There's psychological problems with it. But that's why the government should be not getting rid of us. They should be trying to work together with the social media platforms to make it less harmful. So screen time, some kids maybe they stay up too late, or they see dangerous content, or they're just on their phone too much. That's why the government should work hand in hand with parents to regulate their kids' screen time and social media use. So if you don't let your kid have their phone in their room at night, or you put screen time on their phone so they can't be on social media all day, it's just, we shouldn't be getting rid of the kids. We should be fixing the problems about social media, because there definitely are problems.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about your peer group and your, young people your age, what would you say are some of the negative impacts of social media that you've seen and observed?
Well, I have seen on social media explicit content, and I've also I see around me that kids in my year and just the school are always on their phones and things. But that's why we need to fix screen time use and the explicit content. That's what the government should be going after. They should be making these companies put more things in place to get rid of the bad things on social media, because we didn't do anything wrong. It's social media companies that have the dangerous content.
And you believe that you and your friends and people your age across the country are being negatively impacted and being almost punished because the government and social media companies can't seem to deal with the content that's out there?
Yes, we haven't done anything wrong. The government should be working with social media platforms to use all this money and resources they're trying to use to avoid the fines of us being on social media. They use the money and resources from that to try make social media safer. We would have better platforms, and I also feel that with social media, kids can be in danger, and that's why we should fix it.
Do you think that you will have any luck with your case?
Hopefully we win, but even if we don't win, the campaign's not over. We keep our views. We still feel what's right, and we will keep fighting until there's a good solution. Because whether you're 16 or 15 or anything below 16, you're still going to see the problems. If you're 16 and say you have like a mental health disorder or something like that, you can still be affected by the explicit content on there. Just because we're under 16 doesn't mean someone over 16 won't be affected by the things on there. So we should be fixing things on social media platforms.
Do you think that many people young people, once this ban comes into effect, that they'll be able to work around these bans?
100%. A lot of people get around these bans. I've already seen like how Snapchat's trying to block it. What if someone's 15, looks like they're 16 and they scan their face? Now they've gone past the ban. And when kids do things in secret, because now parents think, oh, the kids are safe because the government's handling it. When kids do things in secret, that's when they're in a more risky situation. Because if they see online bullying or they experience like a predator or something like that, who are they going to report it to? They have a fear of reporting because they're worried they're going to get in trouble because they weren't supposed to be on the social media platforms in the first place. And that's just more dangerous because now they have to deal with the online bullying by themselves and the predators by themselves. And that's where problems start.
That was 15-year-old Noah Jones speaking to me from Sydney. Now, search teams are struggling to reach communities cut off by catastrophic flooding and landslides across Indonesia, Sri Lanka and Thailand. It's estimated that at least 1,400 people were killed and another 800 people are still missing in the storms. In Indonesia, the worst-hit country, washed-out roads and collapsed bridges have left rescuers struggling to reach some of the hardest-hit areas. Satellite imagery shows heavy flooding on the island of Sumatra, with entire towns surrounded by floodwaters. Meanwhile, in Thailand, nearly 4 million people have been impacted by the flooding. These snapshots show the vast scale of destruction in the southern part of the country after flooding overwhelmed a nearby lake. Sri Lanka was hit by a separate storm that left entire areas underwater. Here we can see villages and farmlands on the coast submerged after widespread flooding. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch is near the central Sri Lankan city of Kandy, an area devastated by the conditions, and sent this report.
This is Gampola. Still a mass of mud 5 days after Cyclone Ditwa hit Sri Lanka.
Please.
On the first day of the floods, residents here begged for help. This is our final moment, the man says. It was Mohammed Farouz pleading for boats that night. He survived, but many others didn't. And by morning, he ended up carrying the bodies of the dead.
So what happened here?
We took 5 bodies from here.
Wow.
And total we took 9 bodies, and we will hand over to hospital. When I took the body, no one is police or navy or anyone not came here. No one is help for us.
These are the bodies he had to carry, laid out here in the mud, a community overwhelmed. Eventually, he and others managed to transfer them to a morgue.
This community has been absolutely devastated by the cyclone. In this house alone, 5 people died, and just next door here, another 6. And local people say they've received very little help. And just look, trying to move around here, it's like wading through treacle. And now, more rain is forecast.
A whole family here tried to flee to the second floor, but they didn't make it. A mother, daughter and son killed alongside a sister and father. They'd come here to escape.
There was heavy rain, but they didn't think that there would be flooding. They left their own home to save themselves from landslides, but they didn't survive. If they had stayed, they would have.
Chamilka has lost everything. The floodwaters have wrecked the photography studio she runs with her husband. Equipment they can't replace. And their home torn apart too.
We don't have a single rupee to start our business again. We spent all our savings on trying to build our house.
Did you receive any warnings?
No, we didn't know anything. If we did, we would have taken our cameras and our computers out. We just didn't know it was coming. They didn't tell us anything. And I've never heard of this area being flooded before.
It's hard to picture what the future looks like now. An already fragile economy battered and flaws exposed. Failures, some believe, made a disaster inevitable. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Kandy District in central Sri Lanka.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, ahead of this Friday's draw for the World Cup group stage, we look at how the Trump presidency could affect the tournament.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
On Friday, the World Cup draw takes place in Washington ahead of next year's tournament in the US, Canada and Mexico. It will be the biggest World Cup with 48 countries taking part, but it comes against the backdrop of a migrant crackdown in America, leaving some fans nervous to travel. Well, Rob Harris joins us live from Washington. Rob, I mean, so much to talk to you about this particular issue because, like all World Cups, politics seeps into the actual football. But just give us a sense, because Friday we are expecting to see this match played out and get some results.
Yes, Friday will be the draw, so fans will start to know exactly where their teams will be playing, whether in the US, in Mexico, or in Canada. And obviously, so much of the politics plays into this because, say, a country like Iran and Haiti will be trying to discover if they will be in the US, because if they are, their fans, it seems, won't be getting visas because they're on Trump's travel ban list. So that is a concern, although today have learnt that the Iranian delegation will be able to come here to DC for the draw. And I've been speaking to one of the people at the heart of the tournament preparations, someone who is right next to Donald Trump here in the White House, the appointed executive director of the World Cup task force for the White House, Andrew Giuliani, son of Rudy. And it's interesting, a lot of our interview, which you'll be able to see later on, was focused on safety, but also reassurances, trying to tell people that a lot of the policies, perhaps they might sound pretty tough, but it's all about trying to protect and safeguard this World Cup. We discussed the prospect of ICE raids at the tournament because there was a concern at the Club World Cup earlier this year that agents could use it to try to find people who are in violation of immigration laws. And he did point out there were no raids there, but he did go on to say that, you know, what Donald Trump has managed to do is he is focused on protecting things in terms of the security. He said the president never rules anything out when it comes to safety and security protecting, whether it's stadiums, fan festivals, American citizens, or those visitors who are coming here. Inevitably, like any sporting event, there will be safety concerns as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were saying, the politics does seep into it. You know, Donald Trump talking about or concerns that he would move some of the matches from the Democratic states. The migrant issue is something that does concern many people in terms of the raids that continue and the sorts of, teams that could enter the United States and play these matches. And that isn't really far away from the discussions around the football.
Yes, very regularly in the Oval Office there, Donald Trump has been using World Cup matches, being in the Boston area, Seattle and California areas, as a means of saying, sort out your safety in Democrat-run areas, or I'll take the matches off you. And FIFA has said basically what the president says. Well, if he says it's about security, then we'd have to abide by that. Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, very often in the White House. In fact, no foreign leader has been in the White House, I think, during Trump's second term than Gianni Infantino, who isn't head of a state, but is head of the world's biggest sport. And it shows the influence, really, of football. And when I asked Andrew Giuliani about the prospect of moving matches, he said it's very much the president's decision, but talks about how the president urges every single governor and every mayor to do the best they can, whatever their politics are, to protect this World Cup. And, you know, they do recognise that it is a big moment for the US. The 250th anniversary of the tournament, of the country, falls during the tournament. Talking about whether or not England will play the US in Philadelphia on that day. And they know how many millions of visitors, at least hundreds of thousands, could be coming to this tournament here, and be trying to plan their trips. And inevitably, the terror threat as well is something that's discussed, very specific in terms of trying to combat that, which is, while they might want to talk about how much of a big sporting event it is, and it undoubtedly is, so much of the resource the federal government is focused on this. A $500 million budget just to combat drones that could pose a threat to major events coming up as well.
Rob, what are England's chances?
Well, they do arrive as one of the favourites. The draw is quite favourable in a way because they've put this new mechanism where they'll separate England from the ability to face like Spain and Argentina until later on in the tournament, potentially not until the final. That's if they win their group. So with Thomas Tuchel, they went through qualifying without conceding a single goal, winning every single game. So they'll be in the draw. Scotland, for the first time, a men's tournament at the World Cup since 1998. It's the biggest ever, expanded from 32 to 48 teams, 104 matches. It will take 8 games rather than 7 games to win it. The World Cup becoming bigger and bigger. And Friday's draw will be a pretty big event. Donald Trump is due there. He's also due to get the first FIFA Peace Prize, having lost out on the Nobel Peace Prize. This has been a creation of FIFA, and also very much to please Donald Trump, which FIFA sees as a way of actually ensuring this tournament goes successfully. Even with his favourite music acts, they've announced the Village People, the 1970s iconic disco group, will be there performing the YMCA, which of course saw Trump singing, dancing to on the campaign trail, and it has really become his signature dance. So quite a show we expect on Friday.
Yeah, very much so. We'll hear more from you, Rob. Thank you so much. Well, that's all from us tonight on The World. We'll be back tomorrow at 9. Good night.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.